Alrighty, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call us to order to the July meeting of the Lawrence City Council. We will begin tonight with an invocation by Councilor Bolt, and I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone, please stand for the invocation and pledge.
Heavenly Father, who art in heaven, you know our needs, Lord, before we even ask them. We come to you tonight asking you to guide us through this meeting, be with us, watch over, keep us. Lord, we want to ask for patience. Lord, we thank you for the grace that you give us, provide us with, and help us, Lord, to be kind to others as we look at our daily lives and we look at other lives. Let us love one another. We want to pray for our country, Lord. We know it's a mess. We want to pray for our servicemen abroad and even here in our homeland. We want to pray, Lord, for our leaders. There's so much going on up in Washington. We just ask, Lord, that you clean house, wash their hearts, get us going in the right direction. Go with us now as we go in the further part of this business, and watch over and keep us and give us where we feel each day of our life. For us in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. First item on our agenda tonight is some opening remarks from me, and I'd have just a bit of a report for everyone. I'll try to get through it as quickly as possible, but there's a lot to update everybody on. Since our last meeting, we held our annual July 3rd celebration for Independence Day. We were able to attract thousands of people to the city for that event, and the feedback from that has just been overwhelmingly positive. But in addition to the bands that came to town to play that everybody enjoyed listening to, we also had the honor of recognizing our veterans. We recognized 3 veterans, and one of them I presented a key to the city, Mr. Paul Odell, and he is now 100 years old and one of our few remaining veterans of World War II. So it was my pleasure to do that. But as it comes to the bands, I can say we're really encouraged that we've had such a positive feedback from that event that has sort of helped cement our reputation as a destination spot for July 3rd and Independence Day celebrations in our region. And we've already had several community sponsors reach out to us and say that they'd like to contribute to that event next year. So seems like that was a resounding success. I do want to take the opportunity to thank our city administrator and all of the members of our team who worked so hard to put that event together. We really should be very proud of that. When it comes to construction projects, we did have an issue with our backhoe that was causing some delays with limb pickups. That's been fixed, and so that delay should be remedied now. The police department and judicial facility in our council chambers is slated to be completed by the end of August. Now that they have sort of dried in the building, that the pace of the work should pick up significantly. If you've been by there lately, you really can notice it's come a long way in a very short time. We have finalized the deed transferring property from Britton Wolf and Rod Holmes to the city next to the Todd Distributors building along East Main Street. As a result of that, we've been able to go ahead and clear the land beside that building that now belongs to the city, so that will help us along the way to constructing the Swamp Rabbit Trail. And I've will say that there is significant interest in that building, which is very encouraging. With regard to planning and development, we have received a updated draft zoning ordinance, which is currently under review and revision to make sure it meets our needs. This is part of the comprehensive planning process that we're engaged in overall. And so, although we've already had a number of public input sessions through that, once the draft version is prepared, we'll hold additional public input sessions so people will have a chance to give us their input, and that will be done in conjunction with and prior to its final approval for City Council. So we certainly want the public to be involved in that process. The one thing I'll say about that is it's something I care very deeply about, because it's a way that we can help prevent problems before we have problems on our hands. We can address areas like sprawl by not having a system of zoning in place which creates it. So now's the time to do it and do it right, and hopefully by the time that's ready to come before City Council, is something that we'll all be proud of. At our last meeting, City Council appointed new board members and commission members. I'm happy to report that all those boards have now met, and they've been in training and discussions with city staff members to make sure that they understand their roles and their respective responsibilities, both as members of the boards and what the boards are intended to accomplish as bodies. So that's encouraging. We've also met with the developers of the Gibson Grove property, which is the subdivision behind and beside the old Milo site. In looking at their plan, we wanted to address things like traffic calming measures, not things that would cost a lot of money, but would just help with traffic internally in the neighborhood. Walkability, internal trails between streets so neighbors can get to know neighbors more easily. So those discussions are ongoing to make sure that whatever neighborhoods eventually get built are neighborhoods that we'll be proud of. Code enforcement has been something that we have been paying particular attention to, and that has become more efficient by the Code Enforcement Department working with the police department. There's now a Class 1 officer that's been assisting with that code enforcement effort, and that's really helped with being able to have a law enforcement officer involved in that process. We've talked a lot about the need for sidewalks and infrastructure improvements. As part of that, we have applied for significant funding through the Department of Transportation for TAP grant fees. That's Transportation Alternative Program fees, or grant funding. And through those TAP grants, those funds can only be spent on things like sidewalks and trails. We can't use that fund to fill potholes or widen roads. But in order to obtain that funding, you have to have good, solid plans that DOT is ready to sign off on. And so we've been working with Davis and Floyd to update plans for some sidewalk improvements, and hopefully those should be ready soon. But that also helps us not only with our TAP grant funding request, but it helps us with the long-term planning process, looking years into the future. With regard to streets and sanitation, we have 4 new garbage trucks They will be here in the next few months, and right now they're scheduled by the end of August. Streets and Sanitation building itself has unfortunately experienced some delays due to supply chain issues. Councilor Bolt was kind enough to ask me about that prior to tonight's meeting. Right now, we're currently awaiting the arrival of what are called truss clips, essentially a key part in completing those buildings. We hope to have those delivered either this week or next week. Once we have those on hand, that project can proceed, and the next step would be to pour footings. As we stand, the anticipated completion date is around mid-September. It was previously scheduled for completion in August, so slight delay, but not significant. I know that folks are not anxious to have to use county facilities. We're thankful that county landfill is just outside the city limits. So we ask your patience in continuing to use that county facility until our city facility is back up and running. But be aware, you do have a place where you can bring your recycling that you're paying for through those county fees, so be sure to make use of it. We have an update regarding several street paving projects as well. Repaving is scheduled to begin next week, and the streets that will be improved are Kennedy's Ring, Coleman Street, Bubb Avenue, Ream Street, Harts Court, and Vine Street. From an administrative standpoint, we began our new fiscal year. That began July 1st. One of the things that we've done to streamline our administrative operations and make us more efficient is the adoption of a new digital purchasing order system. That seems to be working well. In the fire department reports that they have answered more than 509 alarms just this year alone. We've seen call volume increase since June 26th due to a new emergency medical dispatching system. That's a nationwide system that is more effective in saving lives than our past dispatch system. Our department alone has had the privilege of being part of 3 calls that played a huge role in saving the victim's life because of this new system. And so that's 3 lives saved with this new system being in place less than a month. So something to be proud of there. More concerningly, we have word that the department has been dispatched to 40 structure fires so far this year. And in the past, 40 structure fires for an entire calendar year would be the norm. So just want to take this as an opportunity to remind everybody to be fire safe, be aware of dangers that might cause fires in your home. Make sure you have smoke detectors, and if you have any questions about that, I know Chief Roberts would be more than happy to address any concerns that you have, and let you know what best practices are with regard to fire safety, and hook you up with smoke detectors. With regard to the fire department itself, we're in the process of finalizing plans for renovations of the Mill Street Fire Station. There were some issues that arose since that building was constructed in 2015, my memory serves. 2011, somewhere around there. And so as we get through the process of finalizing the plans, that'll allow us to bid out the work and see how we proceed with that, and I'll bring that matter before council. We've also started the process of securing a new fire engine. That may seem like a bit of a surprise, but it takes up to 26 months to construct fire engines these days. As a kid who grew up with a dad who's a fire truck salesman, that is pretty remarkable. But 26 months away, we'll be here before you know it. So, and any funds from the city would not be due until we take delivery of the truck. So beginning this process 2 years out is probably a wise thing to do. So that's how we are proceeding. We're also seeking a Palmetto Pride tree grant. This is unrelated to fire department, just entirely separately. We're seeking the department Palmetto Pride tree grant. This grant would pay for a variety of trees, a variety of types of trees, but they are available on a first-come, first-served basis. These are trees that we would plant ourselves, but we're looking at ways to beautify the city and plant trees along our corridors coming into the city, specifically in the 221 area, on the Hillcrest area, Fleming Street, areas which are more commercial in nature and haven't seen as much activity in beautification in some time. With regard to the police department, police held a summer camp from July 17th through the 20th. There were around 20 young people who were able to participate in that camp, and they did so free of charge. We worked together with the school district to provide a variety of activities for the kids, and from what I understand, they had a great time. We do want to extend our thanks to the school district for their generosity in providing the facilities and the food for that camp. Tomorrow is August 1st. We'll host our first ever Lawrence Police Department National Night Out from 6 to 8 p.m. This is something we're doing in conjunction with law enforcement agencies across the county, but this is something that I have wanted to do for quite some time. It's something that the chief and I talked about during his interview process. Now that he's gotten his feet wet a year on the job and settled in, we're bringing this to reality and looking forward to having the community have an opportunity to get to know law enforcement in a relaxed setting, so members of the community are able to see police beyond who they are in their uniforms and just as regular individuals. We believe that this will make a big difference in building positive community relations. In addition to that, we'll have food and a car show and a mini horse exhibit. That's right, a mini horse exhibit. And we're just a helicopter for kids to be able, and big kids to be able to explore, and showcases of all sorts of police and fire and EMS vehicles, because part of this is building respect in the next generation so that young people want to grow up to be police and fire and first responders. So it should be a fun night. I hope members of council will take the opportunity to take part in that. They're doing, in addition to sort of the fun stuff though, we're doing our job to take drugs off the streets. We've had a significant number of drug-related search warrants that were issued across the city. We've pressed charges against more than 10 individuals involved in drug trafficking offenses, including substances such as fentanyl, cocaine, meth, and marijuana. We've seized substantial amounts of cash, and we're in the process of confiscating vehicles that were used in drug trafficking operations. All this to say, we're cracking down on crime, and we're making sure that people know that Lawrence, South Carolina is not a safe place if you're interested in violating the law, in harming our community. In addition to those achievements, the police department is committed to its regular patrol duties, but those have been significantly assisted by the addition of flock cameras, which have helped us pinpoint movements of people engaging in illegal activity. This year at the Municipal Association, Shara, if I'm not mistaken, was recognized for having this technology and won statewide recognition for this system. Obviously, we didn't have that system until just this year, so we weren't eligible for that kind of recognition this year. But our results have been all the reward that's needed. Those flock cameras are helping us take criminals off the streets. And to end on a light and happy note, speaking of our Municipal Association meeting, we joined cities all across our state this past weekend in Greenville, and we were honored to receive the Excellence on Main Street Award with Gary and April Bailey, whose hard work brought the Bailey Building back to life. If the Excellence on Main Street Award sounds familiar, it's because the city of Lawrence has won that award for the past 3 years straight. We are the first city in the history of the state of South Carolina to do that. So, major pat on the back to Gary and April Bailey and their hardworking team and city council for your contributions and help in making the tax credits available that allowed them to bring that building back to life. This was an all-hands-on-deck effort, and it's really nice to see our city get that recognition. On a personal note, I was elected to serve as vice president of the Association of South Carolina Mayors. That is an honor that I'm very humbled to receive from my fellow mayors, but I look forward to using that as an opportunity to be involved in some really good discussions and hopefully bring best practices to Lawrence and learn from other people's mistakes so we don't make them ourselves, and advance not just what is best for the city of Lawrence, but what's good for cities all across the state of South Carolina. But I can say, while I feel personally humbled to have been elected to that position, I don't believe I would have been put in that position if the city of Lawrence weren't doing an outstanding job, and if we hadn't caught the attention as a city of leaders from across the state. So I hope that everyone in Lawrence is proud. We have a lot to be proud of. That's all I have in my report written. I do have one other that was announced to me this morning. We've gotten to know Madison Workman through her tireless work. Her efforts to assist with planning and to bring our city's codes and codes enforcement into the 21st century and to look forward to the future and craft a path forward for the city have been tireless. Her work with our city boards to assist them in running smoothly and professionally have been a labor of love. It must be a labor of love. And she let me know this morning that she has been offered a position with the city of Lyman. And though I can't understand it, she has agreed to accept that position. So I will ask City Council to please show our thanks and appreciation for Madison. The door is always open, and we might be able to find some clerical position or something at her return. We're grateful. Alrighty, so that's all the report I have. I know that there was a lot in there, but we've been busy. So moving on to the next item on the agenda is our public participation and hearing portion. I see from our administrator that no one signed up to participate in that, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. Before you is the council agenda for tonight and our minutes from our last meeting. Do I hear a motion concerning the consent agenda?
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as printed.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Lowry, and then I believe Ms. Sullivan got it in just under the wire. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I call the question. All those in favor of approval of the consent agenda, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. And the agenda is approved. All right, moving to the next item, we have old business. First item of old business before us is ordinance 6-23-01. An ordinance amending and restating the code of ordinances with regard to business licenses. This matter passed on first reading at our last meeting and now comes before us for second reading.
Mr. Mayor, make a correction. Was it 06-2301? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one.
6-2301. This came before us at our June meeting.
Okay. I'm looking at the wrong paper.
No worries.
I'd like to motion to approve the second reading.
All right, we have a motion from Councilor Bolt and a second. Is there any discussion? First discussion is, Councilor Sullivan, thank you for looking out for me. All right. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of passage of 6-2301 on second reading, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, no. And that passes unanimously. All right. Moving on to our next item is 6-2302, which amends and restates the code of ordinances of the city of Lawrence as it relates to the care of dogs and other animals. Are there any motions?
I make a motion that we approve ordinance 06-2302 as written.
Thank you, Councilor Sullivan. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion from Councilor Sullivan and a second from Councilor Lowry. Is there any discussion? I have just a brief comment to make. I do my very best to not get into the back and forth on social media. But I do know that animals and care of animals and feral cats and what happens to dogs is something that is of concern to our community. I hope our community can see by passage of this ordinance, if council chooses to do so, that this is something that is of concern to city council. And this is not a silver bullet. It's not a one-size-fits-all that immediately solves everything, but it does give law enforcement the ability to address certain issues and establishes some clearer standards for personal responsibility about what is and isn't acceptable as it relates to how people treat animals. And hopefully, if people who own animals in the city do what they need to do, we will have less of a problem with stray dogs and cats. If they don't do what they need to do, I appreciate city council's ability to give law enforcement the tools they need to do something about it. So this helps plug the gap in our laws. That's all I have to say about the matter. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of passage of 62302 on second reading, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. All right. Moving right along. We now move to ordinance 62303, which amends the Code of Ordinances of the City of Lawrence as it relates to offenses and miscellaneous offenses. This would include giving false names to law enforcement. It affirmatively states a duty to identify oneself to law enforcement when detained. It makes unlawful disruption of city council. It prohibits camping on public property unless authorized by the city. We had significant discussion on this last time. Are there any motions concerning this ordinance?
Make a motion that we accept 62303 on second reading.
Thank you, Councilor Campbell. Is that a second?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. There we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And ordinance is approved on second reading. All right, that takes care of our old business. We now move on to new business. The first item of new business before us is Resolution 23-7-1, resolution approving a memorandum of understanding between the City of Lawrence and Main Street Lawrence, USA. This is a resolution, so it's only requires one vote for approval. Technically, this is one of those things that may have been done at the executive level, but because it concerns our relationship with Main Street, I felt it prudent to bring this before City Council. As you all know, since the time of our last meeting, Main Street's director, Jonathan Eyrick, who served in that position for 17 years, has taken a position with the state Main Street organization. We were pleased to meet up with him over the weekend at the Municipal Association meeting. So he has settled into that role, and the Main Street Board has proceeded with their efforts to hire a new director. With that said, we wanted to make sure, as the Main Street Board looks for its new director, as we begin this next chapter of our relationship with Main Street, that there's clarity between the city and Main Street as a nonprofit organization about who is responsible for what. And establish clear benchmarks so that each side has the ability to plan and coordinate in the most effective way possible. So a significant amount of effort has gone into hammering this out. This is a document that was begun by Main Street, and we made some suggested changes on our end and went back and forth between the executive committee of Main Street and the city, and then it was brought before the full board of Main Street at a meeting this past week. This was approved unanimously by the Main Street Board as a whole, and is brought to City Council with the request that City Council approve it and authorize me to sign on the city's behalf. This is a memorandum of understanding. It's not a contract. There are no penalties for violation of this, but it does provide a framework. It provides a basis for a mutual understanding of how we work together. I do want to note that it is important for the city that Main Street remain a separate, independent, nonprofit organization. By doing so, it gives Main Street the ability to do things that we as a city can't do. On the other hand, obviously, because of so much of what Main Street does as an organization is dependent upon the city and our resources, both in terms of the physical facilities of the city and our personnel, not to mention our budgetary contribution annually. We want to make sure that the services that Main Street is providing to the city are effective and efficient and done in the best way possible. So that is what this is intended to do. One thing I will point out to City Council on page 4, number 13. It does state that it's intended that the funds that the city contributes to Main Street shall be directly related to the programmatic costs of Main Street rather than the administrative costs of the nonprofit. Those would be things like employee salaries, et cetera. So I feel comfortable with the level of accountability that brings, that the city is paying for, helping contribute to the cost of the services that Main Street brings to the life of the city, and the administrative costs of the nonprofit are borne by the nonprofit. That's sort of background about how this came about, why it's before you, and what it is. For the purpose of discussion, I would entertain any motions regarding the resolution.
I'll make the motion. For discussion.
Thank you. a motion, is there a second?
Second for discussion.
We have a motion and a second. Who wants to discuss first?
I would like to know about, the board itself. How is it made up? Main Street Board? 'Cause I've been asked that question.
It's a board that is self-perpetuating in that the board appoints new members to its own board. One of the things that I will point you to that relates to that would be number 14 on page 4. It says, Main Street Lawrence shall periodically evaluate its policies, procedures, and bylaws to ensure compliance with all applicable laws. In conducting this periodic evaluation, priority will be given to ensuring the stability of the organization long-term, the ability of the board to perform its duties effectively, the ability of the executive director to perform effectively, and the ability of the board to faithfully represent the interests of its constituencies. The reason that language was included was to ensure some effort, to ensure an effort on the part of Main Street to select a board which represents the diversity of the city, not only in terms of ethnicity, but a breakdown between men and women in industries, so that restaurants and that type of establishment is included in the representation of the board. That's something that has not been as clearly defined in years past, and so that's why that language was included.
Is there a term limit to serve?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I know some of the board members been there since the conception of it.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
The-
Or maybe it's volunteers.
Yeah, I think there are people that may volunteer that have been around since the beginning, but we have the board chair here with us tonight. He can correct me if I'm wrong, but my recollection is that it's 2 consecutive terms, and then you have to take at least 1 rotation off.
I believe that's correct, yes, sir. 3-year terms.
2 3-year terms, and then
3-year term.
that's a good question, and like I said, that's something that was specifically included in our discussions with Main Street. Mr. Paul, did you have a question?
Well, not really, but now, the tax money that's collected is collected through the county treasurer or on our taxes. And how much is on our taxes? I can't.
$20
$20 per household or
per parcel. Parcel.
So that is unaffected by this.
Yeah. Well, I know, I was just asking about how much it was, taxes, and it's paid out quarterly.
Annually, I believe.
Annually.
Taxes come in every month.
Yeah.
It's just when people pay them, they trickle into the city, but most people pay them, before April and January, so.
That's all.
Any other questions? As I said, there was a lot of discussion that went into this to try to craft something that is fair, but also gives us the ability to make sure we're being good stewards of our resources.
So the new Main Street Director's position has it, as far as he reports to the board, the way that person is employed has not changed.
That's correct. The Main Street Director would report to the board. However, there are much clearer requirements about what is expected of that position. There's also an ability for the city on a regular basis to be able to bring issues to the Main Street Board by way of our representation on the board, because either I or my designee sits on that board. In the past, if there was something that wasn't brought to the board's attention by way of the director, the board would have no way of knowing about it. In this setup, there's some built-in timelines so that we're sort of having check-ins about how things are proceeding according to the annual plan for that year. And this really doesn't have, this is not meant to reflect on Mr. Irick's in that position. I think both sides felt like there was an opportunity here with this changeover to make sure that there was clarity. Set the next person up in the best possible position they could be in. Any further discussion?
And I guess, Mayor, like you said, the whole board of magistrate has, and you, of course, have looked over everything, and this is going to be a good attitude between the city and Main Street Board.
Yes, sir. The Main Street Board adopted this unanimously.
That's good. Okay.
Further questions? If I am correct in hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of approval of Resolution 23-701, approving this memorandum of understanding between the City of Lawrence and Main Street Lawrence USA Incorporated, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. And that is approved unanimously. We will all sit around and sing Kumbaya together.
Good plan.
All right. Moving on to the next item on the agenda is Ordinance 72301. Not to be confused with Resolution 23701. But this ordinance, which obviously will require 2 readings, provides for an amendment to the zoning ordinance with regard to tax map number 906-20-01-068. As I mentioned previously, our zoning ordinance is in the process of being updated as a whole. Just by way of example, there are parcels such as the old Lawrence Mill site, which is currently zoned as a manufacturing site. But the best and highest future use of that site is likely not manufacturing. And City Council would have to take action on that site in order for something else to be located there. I cite that just by way of example that the zoning changes which are before you tonight are based upon needs to rezone based upon the existing zoning map. But these are the kinds of changes that we hope to have a fix for when it comes to the new zoning map that is adopted. When and if the time comes. So until that is approved, there are plans that we don't want to hold back and prevent from taking place. And so that's why the Planning Commission has made the recommendation to us that we rezone this particular site.
I make the motion, we approve 7-2301 on first reading, and we'll, if anything comes up, we can look at it next month.
Thank you, sir. That's, we have a motion. Is there a second? Thank you. We have a motion from Mr. Bolt and a second from Ms. Miller. Is there any discussion? Please note that the changes this from a residential manufactured housing district to a general commercial and distribution district. All right. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I call the question. All those in favor of passage of 72301 on first reading, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. And the measure is approved. Moving on to the next item before us is similar. An amendment to the city zoning with regard to tax back number 906-12-10-027. This is a site along Mill Street. I have personally met with the individuals who are looking to build here, and they would like for this property to be rezoned from general commercial to urban residential. Or the B4 to R3. Of course, this is just a zoning change. This isn't a final approval of any plan. So with respect to any of this, if there is a plan for housing, for instance, that would need approval from the Planning Commission would separately consider that and give whatever feedback was appropriate. And if and only if it was approved by the Planning Commission, it would then also have to come to City Council, and City Council would also have to approve it at that stage. So all this is doing is allowing for houses in places where they can't be now.
It butts up to R3 now.
Correct.
Well, I'll make the motion that we approve 723, so we can continue on with it and see if anything else need to be done. Now, okay.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Bolt. We've got a motion from Mr. Bolt, second from Mr. Lowry. One of y'all got some discussion.
Yeah, we jumped right into discussion, so I'm sorry about that. So this is over where there's houses nearby already.
If you're looking at the fire department, it is to the right of the fire department. Between the fire department and,
This is not really an area where our commercial district's growing anyway, so.
Is that
Correct.
To me, it makes sense to turn
back of, Baldwin Buick? Is, so if you're looking at fire departments to the right, so, and then there's, is that, well, right there on, exactly on the right, if you're facing, is that, Hank Road, isn't it?
it's sort of, as I recall, it sits on both sides of the road. And their Pet Dairy is what I always used to know the place is. Right on the corner of Mill Street. Behind there, between that commercial area that fronts 221 and the fire department, it sort of sits in that
Kind of a little strip.
vacant area.
Kind of a little strip right there.
So it doesn't touch,
Correct.
no, this map is a little, so it's this part right here.
Yeah, it's sort of a wedge.
It's not this that touches Hart.
Correct. It's the
Okay, that's the problem.
kind of wedge area behind.
That's the problem I was thinking of down below, where that apartment, halfway house is down below there, Victor's place. There used to be a little road through there that run into the back of Baldwin Buick. You cut off Mill Street and you go right into it. So that's the reason I asked if it was kind of behind where Baldwin Buick was, runs to the Mill Street area. Okay, I know where it is now.
Folks have already reached out to CPW, as I understand. There's sewer readily available in the area. There's sufficient utility to meet needs. And I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think what they have proposed would be needed. But we'll bring that to council and planning commission when they're ready to do that. But I would suffice to say, what was very encouraging to me is their desire to sit down with the city in conjunction with this, and make sure that they weren't running a fool's errand, and that they wanted to build what we need and what we want to see there as a city. So that's encouraging.
What cost range are they looking at?
I couldn't say at that point yet.
A solid traffic study will be done, right?
Correct. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of passage of ordinance 72302 on first reading, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. And matters approved unanimously. I wish we had put something else on the agenda. We're just
So agreeable.
moving along at a clip here. No, I appreciate City Council's work on all this. I know we had a loaded agenda, but that's about the most efficient meeting I can think that we've had. So,
It's summertime, everybody's hot and tired.
I'm not going to jinx this. Is there a motion, Mr. Ball?
I make a motion we adjourn this meeting.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you. Go home and have supper.